Aloha! Welcome to Truth in Movies. What's up, everyone? Thank you so much for being patient while I got the new credits all rendered and wrapped up for the end of the show today. And man, this is a sweet flick. Okay, man, I'm becoming a Nick Cage fan so quick. It's cheesy. It's a cheesy movie like a lot of Nick Cage's are, but it's good. And it's packed full of esoteric breadcrumbs. We're going to jump right into this movie. Thank you so much, everybody in the chat, for all your support and friendship with one another and good vibes. All right, cool. So this is called Renfield. And if you didn't know already, this is actually based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula, the original book. In the book, he had a thrall or a slave, somebody who's his familiar, and his name was Renfield, somebody that worked for Dracula. So the whole movie's about his, it's not about Dracula, but Dracula is played by Nick Cage in it. So let's jump right into this movie, Renfield. This is awesome. Now, we meet Renfield at the very beginning. He's sort of in this, sort of self-help group, right? He needs a little bit of help because he doesn't like his position. He doesn't like being a thrall. He doesn't like being plasma possessed and working for the enemy, for the bad guys. He kind of got suckered into it, just like a lot of us do, actually. So this movie is going to resonate with a lot of real life events that we go through and have gone through since the world is starting to fall and get worse and worse and worse, right? So he says, I am in a destructive relationship. So he's in this little group, right? And you notice right away that there's this sort of bluish green glow to everyone in the group, right? You'll see this a lot, especially it's a lot of North Pole symbolism, Mount Meru symbolism, and the Aurora Borealis or the Northern Lights, which indicates an actual physical location in our world, and it also indicates like the good energy, like that good vibe energy, that green heart chakra energy, right? So he starts off, he's in this group, and he's talking about how he's in this destructive relationship with Dracula, we're going to talk about Dracula a lot in this one. And then we go back and it shows you, he sort of flashes back to when he first met Dracula, and it's this old movie style right here. And you can see this is Dracula's castle right up here. And up on Dracula's castle, there's this lightning. And I noticed every time in the movies when they show the place where the bad guys live, especially if they're a vampire or Dracula, they'll show you that there's always some kind of a storm, a lot of lightning, a lot of electricity symbolism, which is appropriate given what Dracula represents in the movie, which we'll talk about. All right, so he goes up and he meets Dracula. He's up there on top of the stairs and he says, Mr. Renfield, I bid you welcome. I bid you welcome. And he goes, I am Dracula. And that's Nick Cage. He does a pretty decent Dracula in this movie too. It's a little different than the traditional Dracula, but it's spot on. He's pretty good at it. Now, let's check out the word Dracula. What does Dracula actually mean, right? We know who Dracula is, the cartoonified version of that. And it says that it means in the Romanian, son of Dracul, which literally means the dragon. So the son of the dragon is what it's implied, right? So what does dragon mean? Well, if we look that up, it says it's directly from the Latin draconem. Now, it says draconem, and it's a nominative of Draco, which means huge serpent or dragon. The serpent symbolism, as we've discussed many times, is that plasma, the red plasma usually, that swirls on in from above during the electromagnetic neutral point of the polarity shift that we're going to go through and that we do go through, right? And nim, draconem, we've already discussed what the word nim means time and time again. Maybe someone in the chat can throw it out there, what the word nim, the root word nim, actually means, right? I'll go ahead and leave that to you guys to discuss. All right, now, also we look it up and it says it's from the word drak, right? So drak is the root of drago. Drago just means of the drak or of the dirk, as you can see here from the Proto-Indo-European root word derk, which sometimes is pronounced with a T, terk or Turk, which is going to come into play in this movie in a bit when we learn about Vlad later on. So from the Proto-Indo-European root word derk, which means to see. So dragon means one who can see, or one of the seers. Interesting. Derk, to see. It also, if you look down there in the old High German, comes from zorat, which means light or clear. Also from the Albanian, which means light. So the word dragon like we've talked about, not only implies like the plasma that comes down, but it also implies something that is looking or watching or looking for, and it is also representative of a light. Literally, physically, actually light in the sky that comes down during this neutral point in the form of those plasma tentacles that come down. This is where we also get the symbolism for those creatures and beings that come down and float down from the sky. They fall down from the sky during the polarity shift. Hey, thanks so much for all your support. I appreciate it, everybody. All right, so just like in The Shining, that's why the movie is called The Shining. So those of us who have an extra dose of that energy or light inside of us have what Stephen King refers to in many of his books as the shine. We have a certain shine to us, you know, and oftentimes if it's a extremely charged up shine, it will be it will be seen physically in our eyes. The light on the inside will actually shine forth from our eyes. Now, speaking of vampires, many different races, but whether they be fictional or, for example, like the Elven race or the El or the Elu, or even the vampires and other cartoonified versions of these fractalverse travelers that fall down into our world, they are said to have a glimmer. They are said to have a shine to them, that they sparkle almost. It's also reminiscent of those who came from or lived near to the North Pole or the Garden of Eden or Hyperborea at the time where that blue beam of light shoots up into the sky and drops down these little viscous particles that land on people and stuff. And it's sort of like an oil that causes people to shine and glimmer. So the vampires are no exception. So Dracula says, Mr. Renfield, I bid you welcome. So we talked about Dracula. Let's talk about Renfield. What does that mean? Well, if you look up the word Renfield, it comes from Raven's field. Ren comes from raven. There's a lot of raven symbolism, a lot of crow symbolism, right? Usually the crow is depicted as a mysterious bird, but one that is has good intentions. It's there to help out in some way, shape, or form, right? It depends on your perspective. But if we look up the word raven, the root, see that? How it says late Old English, Rafe? You see that Rafe? That's the same root as Rappa or Raphael, right? Raphael, the Raphaim. It can mean healer and stuff like that. Usually it has a positive context to it. So let's look up the root word Rafe for raven or crow from the crow's field, right? Now, if we look up Rafe, it's found within the word rafter or rafter, right? Like on your roof, the rafters. Now, a rafter is a sloping timber of a roof, right? But in Old English, the root is raf tras, which is interesting. Tras basically means a pile of, or like a whole bunch of something, basically. And if you look up raf, it means a beam or a pole, the rafters of a building. So a whole bunch of beams or poles that go to a building. So interesting, his name actually doesn't mean crow's field. It means field of the beam, right? Field of the beam or field of the pole, related to the Old Norse raptor, which means log, from the Proto-Germanic raftra, from Proto-Indo-European raptro, from the root rep, which means a stake or a beam, which is really interesting because a stake is what is said to kill a vampire, right? You put a stake through their heart and that's the only way to get them to die, right? That stake is symbolic. It represents something that's not like a physical piece of wood or a pole or whatever, but light, the true blue beam, that arrow that never misses its target, that goodness, that righteous path that does not deviate, that goes straight to the heart, right? And that's what Renfield represents, right? Right now, we're learning that Renfield starts off as somebody who's kind of an innocent, somebody who's kind of irregular, and he gets recruited by Dracula, right? But he doesn't enjoy that. That's why he's at that group. So Dracula says, "You will make a very good assistant, Mr. Renfield." So now Dracula, who represents that red plasma that comes down from the sky, or the great dragon from above, right? Negatively charged energy, or energy that is here to kill, to destroy, to help to reset the world, to clean house, basically, to start everything brand new so that blue beam energy can come in and actually clean up and fill our world with positive energy. So he says, "You will make a good assistant, Mr. Renfield." So he's going to try to trick those who have that remnant of the blue beam energy, right? To get them to work for him. He's going to try to influence them, which is all he can do. He can't make people his slave. He can only ask them, right? Now, they're still flashing back. You see Renfield right here and Dracula sort of wooing Renfield. So this is the red plasma. This is the temptation that we face as those who have the remnant of that good nature, those positive good vibes inside of us, right? However you'd like to call that. We are tempted, especially in the world that we live in today, when the energy is being sucked in and charged into the inner recesses of our world, where all that good energy is lacking in the world today. We live during a time, fallen times, or sinful times, or bad times, or times of hardship, or degradation of society, etc. And it's interesting because Dracula says, I never drink wine, right? He never drinks wine. He drinks blood. He drinks blood, but usually, check this out. Now, this is all very symbolic. He says he never drinks wine, right? And they often portray vampires or Dracula or whoever as like, he wants the blood of like virgins and good people and stuff like that. But we'll find that it's not really good people. Okay. It's not really that. And oftentimes I've seen this in a lot of horror movies that the bad guys don't really attack innocent people, oftentimes, right? They actually, the people that they attack, they'll clue you in on the movies that they're attacking people who have, gotten drunk or been sexual in nature with one another, or just traditional things that are considered sinful or bad or whatever, right? I'm not saying they are or aren't, but that's what the movies portray, right? He says, I never drink wine. So what does wine represent? I'll tell you in just a second, but check this out. That's interesting. In the background, they have, he's got one of those knights in shining armor, that knight's armor, right? Full metal, which is used, as a sort of walking Faraday cage whenever our world is electromagnetically charged in the atmosphere, so that people don't get zapped whenever they go into places that are electrically charged. But he says, I never drink wine. So what does wine represent? Well, if we look it up, it comes from vin, which is basically vine, or the fruit of the vine, or from the vine. Also fin, or Finn. So if you ever see characters in movies that are named Finn, usually they represent good people, right? Or the good guys or whatnot, because they represent those who have the true vine or the good vine inside of us. It means vine, basically. Jesus himself was called the true vine. It describes Jesus's disciples as branches of himself, who are described as the true vine, right? So Jesus would be like a type of the true vine, or the blue beam of the earth that rises up and touches the sky, and that energy fills the world during the time of the golden age, right? So there are beings that are incarnated into this world in certain areas, and they take on that energetic signature. They take on that frequency, that good vibe. It's the good vibe tribe, as I like to call it. So we are the remnant of that blue beam that is no longer in the world today. That's why we are called the remnant, right? But the times are about to flip, and the times are about to change whenever it will be the red plasma and the bad guys who will be a remnant, and we will be the ones to populate the world, leading us into the good times. This is just a picture that I sort of put together from some other pictures that I had found. This is an example of what you could imagine in your mind, what it looks like when the plasma at the North Pole bursts out of Mount Meru, shoots up to the depressurization point up there in the sky, that's basically a hole up in the sky that reveals that red eye, or that all-seeing eye, and that beam shoots up and it creates little eddies as it goes, and that is the world tree. That is the vine. That is the true vine, or that is the vine of the world, the spine of the world, Osiris's spine, etc., and so on and so forth. All right, so we get back to Dracula, and Renfield's talking, and he says that he introduced me into high society, right? So this is one of the temptations that red energy comes in, and I'm just using these as general, I'm wearing red right now. It doesn't mean that I'm evil or anything, right? It's just symbolic, right? Red versus blue. And those things can mean or symbolize different things based on the context, okay? So take it with a grain of salt. By the way, we're going to mention salt later on in this presentation. He introduces me into high society, and you'll notice that high society back in the day used to wear things like the top hat. The top hat is a flat form of the conical hat. The conical hat was worn by beings who covered their elongated skulls, their elongated heads, right? These vampires are not just myths and legends. They were real, actual beings. The vampire form, as we're familiar with it, is a cartoonified caricature of a reality, of a true historical tribe or type of people who came down from other worlds, basically aliens, if you'd like to call them that. They also wore their collars popped. So that's where the whole popping your collar came from. You know, people think that they're really cool if they pop their collar. That's because it's an elven standard of beauty. The standard of beauty of those who looked at the younger gods who were placed in control of the major cities, and they had to wear long collars to pop them up in order to keep the sunlight off of them because they were photophobic. Okay. They came from some other world. They're not used to like a point of focus that we call the sun in this world that burns and burns. You know, we have those of us who have survived and our ancestors survived and had stayed here the last time became used to that light source. But they, as newbies, they were pasty, pale, white skinned creatures from other places. So the sun hurt them actually much quicker than it would us. It burned them right away. So they wore capes and they wore collars that were popped up and stuff so that they could stay safe and out of the sunlight. And also they became rich too. Like that's another thing. They became the rulers of the world, and you know, they helped out they helped out the survivors, right? Those who had no idea how to live life or how to plant food or anything after their apocalyptic cycle in the past. So these beings had traveled, had the technology to travel, you know, during these events because they understood them. They traveled, they landed into our world, and then they helped out to rebuild society with the condition that, you know, they would be in power. Or maybe some of us actually thrust them into positions of power. Regardless, they're the ones that accumulated and began to accumulate all of the wealth, not at first in the form of money or gold or anything like that, but in the form of the trust of mankind, our energy that we spent helping them, building their temples or their houses, which they lived in, you know, which turned into a form of worship and stuff too. So here's Renfield, and he says, and then he made me his familiar. Those who are familiar with that particular frequency or that vibration, okay? They are familiars. You don't have to say some sort of an oath or make some sort of a promise to a vampire or whatever to become a familiar. The familiar is a like frequency. It's a familiar frequency. You resonate and vibe with, or whoever it is, with either that good frequency that gives and is selfless, or that selfish and negative frequency that that takes and constantly just takes away from, right? Now, we got Renfield. We go back to the present day, and he's like, oh yeah, so he has to pop this bug into his mouth. He's holding onto a spider, right? And when he eats these bugs, he gets like sort of Dracula powers for a very limited time. So he gets like superpowers, basically. Excuse me. And he says, oh, the bugs. This comes up a lot, right? So he pops this bug into his mouth like it's medicine, right? This is how he gets his powers, okay? He doesn't have any kind of superpowers until he eats a bug. And he talks about how Dracula's powers come from consuming human life, which is what Dracula does. Dracula, or that red plasma, takes the power away from us. There's powers or energies that add to or give energy or power, and there's powers that they become powerful because they take it away from others. So you see him pop that bug, that little spider, into his mouth right there. It shows this little x-ray, and then it goes down his throat, and he swallows this bug. He's a bug eater, okay? So while he's worshiping Dracula, while he is a familiar, or while he has a vibe that is familiar with that negative energy, he's eating bugs. And then his eyes turn yellow. He says, my power comes from eating bugs. Now his eyes turn this exact same color that the Sith in Star Wars, their eyes turn too. These bad guys tend to have these sort of a yellow, goldenish, sometimes red look in their eyes like that. They're called Sith eyes if you're a Star Wars fan. And I found this cool meme online just to give you an example. We're going to go somewhere with this. It says, if you live long enough, you start seeing the same eyes, and then usually it says in everyone, but then on this one it says in flamingos, and it's supposed to be a joke, right? But it's not a joke. Flamingos do have Sith eyes. Look at that, right? Take a look at this flamingo right here. And look at that. Well, it's hard to see right there. But anyways, you can see that the flamingo clearly has the same Sith-colored eyes. So if we look it up and we ask why do flamingos have those colors of eyes, it says that the flamingos get this coloring that they have in their feathers, their legs, their eyes, and it comes from the shrimp, the mollusks, and the small crustaceans that they consume. Interesting. Okay. Jaundice is a condition in the skin, the whites of the eyes, and the mucous membranes that turn them yellow because of a high level of bilirubin. Bilirubin, a yellow-orange bile pigment. Jaundice has many causes, including hepatitis. That's the one that we're going to focus on right now. Okay, hepatitis A virus, and these are some articles in the news. Hepatitis A virus in shellfish. Consumption of bivalve shellfish like cockles, oysters, and clams is strongly associated with hepatitis A outbreaks. Here's another one. Michigan posts their 25th hepatitis A death. Restaurant worker is sick. And you can see it says anyone who ate or drank anything from the implicated Red Lobster restaurant in Oakland County, and there's lots and lots of articles like this from different seafood, especially Red Lobster, but different seafood restaurants across the United States and probably across the world. I've found many in the United States alone. And it says anyone who ate or drank anything from the implicated Red Lobster in Oakland County has developed symptoms of hepatitis A. Here's another one. Red Lobster employee in Pinellas County tests positive for hepatitis A. So I asked the question, do crabs carry hepatitis? And it says because of its unique habitat and special feeding mechanism, shellfish, which are not fish at all, especially bivalve shellfish, is an important vehicle responsible for the transmission of hepatitis A. We're going somewhere with this, so hold on for just a second. Bivalve shellfish, what is that? Such as clams, oysters, scallops, mussels. Those are the main ones that they listed, but they didn't want to list the other ones in the articles, right? So it says here, other molluscan shellfish, such as whelks and lobster and crab. These things have a high tendency to carry hepatitis, which can give you jaundice, which can make your eyes turn yellow. I did a whole video, a couple of different videos about how what we consider to be seafood and shellfish are actually giant ocean bugs. Okay, they are bugs. I'm not saying they look like bugs, so I'm just going to call them that. They are bugs. Okay, this is huge. This dude in the movie is a bug eater, and I believe the movie's trying to tell us something. Now, if you like, crab and lobster and all that stuff, I'm not judging you. I'm not saying that you're a bad person. I'm just saying the movie is implying to be cautious about eating insects. Crawfish or crayfish, lobsters, crabs, and shrimp are crustaceans which come from the arthropod classification, which are invertebrates that have an exoskeleton, a segmented body, and a paired jointed appendages like bugs. Right? This is a bug on the land. This is a bug that is underwater. This is a bug on the land. This is a bug underwater. Shrimp, or whatever you want to call it. Now, interesting to note, right? Speaking of whether or not seafood is actually sea bugs, if you have an allergy, this says with an allergy to seafood like crustaceans, shellfish, mollusks, and dust mites, there is also the possibility of an allergy to food insects. Now, this is a new term for me, okay, that they're starting to call insects food, or they have a classification of food called food insects. Okay, for me, they're bugs, right, that need to be sprayed and stepped on and stuff like that. I don't know, I try to be nice to them if they're, if I can or whatever, but regardless, they're bugs. So the reason why that so many people may have allergies to eating certain food bugs, whenever they also have allergies when they eat certain shellfish and seafood, is because they are the exact same thing. They're the same exact thing, right? Now, they would never make us eat bugs. It's my choice, right? No, be careful, because there's many articles that have come out just this year that say that the European Union officially put bugs onto the menu. They officially made it, or I'll just read it here. It says that the European Union ruled that the maggot-like larvae of lesser mealworms, a type of shiny black beetle, and house crickets can be ground up and added as an ingredient at all of your restaurants, in all of your food products, etc. And who knows how they're going to label that on the actual ingredients. Maybe it'll say natural flavors. I don't know. But I do know that it's time to be careful. If you're not a bug eater, I'm not a bug eater. So it's time to be careful about the things that we're consuming and to be a little bit more picky about those things. It says the edible insect revolution has arrived in Europe. If the thought of worm burgers with cricket crisps on the side makes your mouth water, you're not alone. Bugs and creepy crawlies are now available on the menu to eat in the European Union. Now, I know that there's other areas around the world and different tribes and cultures that have always eaten different kinds of bugs. I'm not, like I said, I'm not judging anybody. I'm just saying it's not for me personally to eat bugs. Bugs are bottom feeders. Okay, it says that it might surprise you that the following fish and shellfish are classified as bottom feeders. Okay, that means those things that feed on your bottom. I mean, basically, it's the bottom of the ocean, but all the stuff like poop and pee and whatever kind of nasty stuff falls to the bottom, right, is eaten. Even if it's not on purpose, even if they're down there trying to find actual food, they're scooping up all that extra crap as they eat. So if you eat those things that eat the bottoms of other creatures, basically, then you're eating that as well. These are the types of bottom feeders. Just examples: halibut, flounder, sole, cod, haddock, bass, carp, snapper, sardines, anchovies, mackerel, squid, octopus, catfish, shrimp, crabs, lobster, crayfish, snails, and shellfish. You'll notice jellyfish are not on that list, by the way. They're actually eaten by the bottom feeders quite often. So if you would like to get real quick jaundice powers or whatever, jaundice super Sith powers, then by all means, you may, if you continue to eat giant sea bugs or just regular insects that are now being added into the ingredients at your local restaurant. If you want to look like a Simpsons character, by all means, continue to eat your bugs, right? And I'm not saying you're a bad person. I'm just saying I'm trying to caution people. I'm trying to just give you the information. If you still want to go to Red Lobster and chow down after this presentation, fine, totally cool with me. I will pass and I'll hang out after. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be there. All right, continuing on in the movie. So there's a scene whenever Dracula is fighting, a long time ago, and Renfield's supposed to try to help him out. And there's this Pope guy who holds up the cross. The cross. Why does the cross hurt Dracula, or that red energy, that red plasma that comes in from the sky, right? Well, if we look at the original word in the Bible, because that's where the cruciform really became popular, was whenever it was added as a translation, or a mistranslation really, to the New Testament about how Jesus was hung up. Okay, originally, if you look at the older translations, it does not say on a cross or a cross beam or a cross section whatsoever. It was a pole. The word that was used is stauros, which happens to be my Dungeons and Dragons wizard name. So when I do play I don't always play Dungeons and Dragons, but when I do, I use the name stauros. Stauros is a Greek word for a stake, another stake through the heart reference, right? To kill the vampires. A stake or an implement of capital punishment. The Greek New Testament uses the word stauros for the instrument of Jesus's crucifixion, and it is generally translated as pillar, or sometimes as a tree, right? Being like the trunk portion of a tree, right? That's because the thing that kills that bad energy, that the red plasma that comes down, is seen as being the blue energy that shoots up once the polarity shift is over with and the electromagnetics of our world are reinstated. They cut off the red dragon, basically the red great dragon that's spiraling on in and terraforming, grounding itself to the world and stuff like that. That gets cut off. The fingers of God, or the fingers of the sky god, or however you want to see it, they're cut off by the magnetism, the strong electromagnetic force that goes back up, right? So all that plasma gets cut off, and at the exact same time, Mount Meru's blue beam, boom, explodes and shoots up to the sky as that arrow of righteousness, right? So we attribute the arrow or the stake or the pole or the column to being what kills the dragon, or Dracula. So here's an example of it too. So Dracula jumps at the Pope, right? He's like, he's trying to get to him, but the Pope casts this awesome, like, spell or whatever. This is back when Christianity, was a little looser, I guess, with their whole, ban on magic and stuff like that. So as you can see, he's caught. He's actually stuck in the air. He's floating in the air right there, right in this blue beam, or this short form of a blue beam that's coming up out of the ground, right? It's called a protection circle. We'll get to that in a bit too. But it's that blue energy, that blue light that protects us from the dragon above that's trying to get to us, right? I believe it's blue because it's ionized oxygen gas that's being released from the earth, right? Which fills our world with fresh oxygen every cycle, or every other cycle. So the Drago, or Dragon, or Dracula is stuck up there while the priest is like trying to keep him at bay. This is all symbolic, okay, of actual physical real events in our world. Now, check this out. Look at his face, right? You saw that he's like a pasty white skinned being, as are all of the vampires typically, or they were originally portrayed as pasty white skinned beings, right? And but when they are near to that blue light, when they are close to, or live in close to Mount Meru and the island that was once portrayed on many of our maps in the Arctic Circle, then their skin will reflect that blue light, giving them blue skin, or what looks to be blue skin, which gives us the blue gods of old, or various fantastic creatures that we have in our modern society that are portrayed as being these blue god type of creatures, or alien types of creatures that just have a reflection of the blue light because they're so close to it, right? Excuse me. Now, the Pope is like, let us rid this world of evil, and he's trying to use the blue beam, the power of the blue beam, the stake that kills the vampire, etc. And you can see he's even wearing red, right? They typically wear like black and white and red. What's black and white and red all over? Dracula. That's funny. Anyways, take a look at the Pope's hat. Let's take a look at this real quick. It's called the mitre, or the mitre, you could say, right? It's really interesting. And it's not just the Pope, but different people in Catholicism will wear a hat that looks like this. It goes back to ancient Egyptian times as well. It says the religious mitre, or the hat from ancient Babylon, the priest of ancient Dagon, or Dagon, fish worship. Now, this is really interesting. It represents this old god, this ancient god called Dagon, or the fish god, right? Now, I know in Christianity, because I was in Christianity for quite some time, it's just shunned. People don't really teach who Dagon was, or, why he's a fish god or anything like that. They just say, oh, it's evil. That was an evil god, You should have no other gods but the Bible God or whatever. And they don't talk about it. They don't educate a lot about it in general, from my experience. So that's what I'm here to do. All right. So if we have an example of this in like ancient Assyrian, Sumerian, Babylonian types of picture forms that we have, this right here is Dagon. So you can see he's wearing the fish head, right? The scales sort of as a cape that flow down from his back. This spiky little bush thing in the middle is the tree of life. Okay. It's shown to you as being small so they could fit everything in here, basically. So it's not all the right size. It's not all to scale. But this is the tree of life that shoots up as that beam, right? And then it spreads out and creates little eddies and torrents and ball lightning and plasma balls and stuff like that surround it, giving you the fruit of the tree of life. Right above that, you will always find the all-seeing eye, which is... and sometimes it's in bird form because the plasma shoots up and it branches out and it creates these auras up in the sky that look like the feathers of a bird, right? So this is one thing of Dagon, or Dagon. Now let's look at the root of dag. The on at the end just means of thee. That's all it means, right? It means somebody who is of, or of thee. So of the dag. What is a dag? Well, if you look it up in Hebrew or even Phoenician, it means fish. That's interesting. So of the fish, why would this guy be called of the fish? Why would there be a god that is a giant fish, right? Why would this god be associated with fish? Well, let's break down this word fish in Hebrew. We're going to start right here. I'm actually going to teach you a couple of Hebrew glyphs, okay? This one right here, straight over and down, is a door, okay? It's supposed to represent a door that is open, basically, okay? So you walk into the house this way, and this is the door. This right here is the Gimel, Hey, Max Collins, thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right, so the Gemel, we've talked about quite a few times. It's the letter G that is also used by the Masons, the Freemasons, etc., as the letter that represents their god that they worship. The Gemel is a person in picture form that is walking. Okay, so that's why it's split at the bottom, because it's supposed to be legs. Okay, and what it implies, it's actually supposed to be a foot technically. All right, so this is supposed to be like a shoe or a foot. And it kind of looks like one too, like with heels or something like that. So door and foot. The foot implies destination, somewhere to go to. Okay, so they would put this foot to sort of mean as to provide context for like, hey, this is the destination. This is the place to go to. This is the place to get to. Okay, so that's why they put G in the middle of the map sometimes, because that was the place to get to. So the door to get to, or the door of the destination, or you could even say the door of destiny. So what does that have to do with the fish? Well, that's interesting, because there are creatures that come out of the inner earth. There are creatures that are born from the earth herself. There are creatures that live beneath our feet in another world, in the upside down from us right now, right? And from time to time, they are released up into our world. Water comes up from the inner earth. Water comes up straight out of, around Mount Meru. There are these indrawn seas that suck in and then they flush out and they push out. So fresh water actually comes up from within the earth herself as well, because it's created down there too, just like it can be created up in the skies. And if you take a look at this ancient god known as Enki, this god right here is often portrayed with this sort of arch of water or fluid that goes from one side to the other and meets at his middle. Enki means basically On-ki, or the Lord of the Earth, right? And what this is, I believe, is it represents the electrical arc, but you also see all of these fish that are inside of this current, right? The god that you see like some corn and stuff right here. I think that's corn. I can't tell. But he is the god that was responsible for bringing life back to the world after we went through the times that we're in now, which is the cataclysms that pulled those blue beams of energy, or that ionized oxygen, back down into the hollow recesses of our world, brought about famines and plagues and sicknesses and stuff like that. So when Enki returns, or when that blue beam returns or whatnot, you have these electrical arcs that happen, and that's also whenever portals are opened from the inner earth, and all of this fresh supply of fish and sea creatures and stuff, they can come up out of there too, which the old legends talk about how there are sea monsters, or there were sea monsters in the Arctic Circle region, within the Arctic Circle, close to the North Pole, that there were many different sea monsters. Where'd they come from, right? There's also some symbolism for Mount Meru. Keep this in mind because it's relevant to the rest of the movie, that Mount Meru is often symbolized by a wolf that is howling up at the moon, because where the actual moon is directly above Mount Meru, up there in the sky, or on the sky itself, right? So this is why they portray wolves howling straight up at the moon so often. This one's just an artist depiction, it's photoshopped and stuff, but it's a good depiction or symbolism. It's a good symbol for Mount Meru, because Mount Meru is considered to be a split mountain, a huge tower that rises up out of the earth that is sort of split and cracked in the middle. So you have like one side and another side, and it's sort of seen as being the split mountain right underneath the actual physical moon. Now, the wolf is a dog, basically, right? If we look up the word wolf, I did a really good video about how vampires are actually related to werewolves, and that's why they're shown in the same movies so often, because the werewolves are just what vampires or the elven race look like as they go through puberty, and they live for like 1,000 years. They start growing hair all over the place. Their noses get longer. Their ears get longer. You know what I mean? They basically start looking kind of like wolfmen after they go through puberty. Some of them were proud of it. Some of them hated it, and they disdained looking so ugly. They didn't want to get old, and they didn't want their bodies to change and to grow horns and stuff like that. And so they did a lot of, cosmetic things to themselves to try to retain that youthful elven glow, or that youthful elven look, or the, the beauty of the gods that we were used to seeing in the public eye. The werewolf class, or the older ones, were not in the public eye because they didn't want to do all that work and deal with humanity. So they would have the younger elves, or the elven race, the younger of their species, go out and become, the pharaohs or the gods or the kings or the queens or goddesses or whatever. So dog, also related to the wolf, right? Just like right here. The word wolf is directly related to Lyca, like the lichens, or lupa. Both of those in the original Proto-Indo-European as root words imply light or shine, just like we talked about earlier, right? So let's check out dog. Now it says here, dog, its origin remains one of the greatest mysteries of English etymology. That's a kind way of saying we have no idea what dog means or where that word even came from, right? Which is interesting because the reason it's interesting to me is because we have a correlation with the fish and the fish god and Mount Meru in the middle of the world and the blue beam and coyotes or dogs or wolves or whatever that look straight up into the sky and howl at the moon, even though they don't do that, okay? You can research that and you'll find the same thing that I have found, I believe, that they don't howl at the moon. Okay, so where did that come from? This is where it comes from. There is an actual quintessential root and a truth to that. So dog is the same as dag, like dagon, right? Or doggone. People say doggone it or dagon, same exact thing. Dog and the Hebrew word fish that we just looked at are the exact same word. Sirius is seen as being the dog star or the dag star. Interesting, right? Great mystery. They have no idea what dog means. Well, I'm telling you right now, it means the door of destiny. These animals were not always named after what they looked like or how they acted, but where they came from or where they were found, what regions they were found. And many different animals come up out of the hollow recesses of our world, and they will be named for those places. So keep that in mind. Now we get back to the movie, and Dracula is they opened up like the window and let the sunlight in or whatever. You would think that he would just nail his like curtains, right? They never do that. But they let the sunlight in and he catches fire. So this is an example of the killer clowns from outer space, or the albino looking gods that float down or whatever. The fractalverse travelers really, as being photophobic. Okay. It sets them on fire, but you'll also notice that the light that is coming from outside is blue light, which is interesting. That is the Antichrist light. The Christ light is the true blue beam, which is cold plasma that you can actually just stand in, like he was in earlier, that blue beam that came up out of the ground. When the light comes up from the ground, it's safe. When the light comes up from the ground, it's healing, and it gives healing properties, and you can be inside of it and it won't burn or anything. But the blue light that comes down from the sky sets things on fire because the sun is going through a color spectrum shift, and it's getting hotter and turning blue. So when it gets hot enough, this is a prophecy right here, just shown to you as truth in the movies, that the sun will begin to burn many things that are on the surface world today. And for more information about that, go ahead and check out my Plasma Apocalypse Advanced playlist. So here's Dracula. He's burnt to a crisp. Looks up over at Renfield, who's supposed to help him out. And Renfield's like, the good guys show up. They do their thing. This is the clash between good and evil. This is the Great War. This is so many different things. Renfield comes and he's like, the good guys do their thing. They show up. And then it's up to me to clean up the mess. Now remember, Renfield, we've translated that into meaning the field of the blue beam, the field of dreams, right? This is the field that is that land at the North Pole that I've shown you so many different times that has Mount Meru in it, right? It's a huge field. There are no mountains. It's a flat land except for the mountainous areas all the way around it, kind of like a pizza, basically, which is a lot of the pizza symbolism too, with Pizza Planet and all this other stuff too. But the crust of the pizza would be the huge mountains that wrap all the way around that North Pole continent, or that island continent that is shown on these ancient lands. The rest of the land is a valley, basically. So it just goes down in, acts as sort of like a crater, and it's said to be very flat and full of lush vegetation and stuff like that. All right, so now Renfield goes to this restaurant in St. Louis, and he says, it's what I call our transitional period. So he's still talking about how he has to clean up the mess because he represents those of the remnant of that blue beam, or even the blue beam itself. The blue beam is blue ionized oxygen, which cleans the world. It fills the world and it purifies the world. Yeah, that exact same thing is being used in medicine today in the modern medical world. They will use plasma in order to sterilize things and clean things out. So our world also does that on the macroscopic scale. You can see all the little blue beam symbolism and stuff, and then the red plasma is underneath. This is sort of symbolic of the times that we go through, right? There's like this fight. There's an energetic fight for Mount Meru and the subsequent Septentrion, or the other mountains or other plasma volcanoes that are at the North Pole area. That is a huge antenna that shoots out a frequency. It shoots out a vibe the world across. Some people call it the Schumann resonance or resonance. Resident evil, basically, right? Whenever the red plasma goes in and takes control of Mount Meru and the blue beam is not seen like as in today, then we have resident evil. Something that is living in Mount Meru or sitting in the throne of God and acting as a god, right? Which is what Dracula does in this movie. He says it's what I call our transitional period. A transitional period is a reference to the polarity shift. It's a transitional shift energetically in our world. And that's when we have the apocalypse. So inside of this, he says, I take him to a new city and I nurse him back to full power. So the red energy goes somewhere each cycle, okay? During this cycle, it rules the world. That frequency rules the world that we live in today. Is everything good in the chat? I just want to double check. I just want to make sure. Give me a thumbs up if you don't mind. If the audio is good, the visuals are good and everything. I just want to double check and make sure. All right. Thank you so much. And inversely, the blue beam will either be on our world or the underworld underneath us, right? And if our sky is blue, their sky will be red. If their sky is blue, our sky will be red, right? So he takes them to a new place. All right. Next up. It says, until the whole cycle starts over again. So even Renfield calls it a cycle, right? This is an apocalyptic cycle, the plasma apocalypse cycle, or PAC, right? This dude is the Pac-Man. Basically, it's plasma apocalypse cycle. Dang, I keep on clicking on the wrong thing here. All right. Oh, thumbs up in the chat. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys. Everybody, thank you so much. All right, now we go back to his little group, right? This is the leader of his little self-help group or whatever, right? Now, he's holding on to a book. Check out this book. Can you read that? Let's zoom in a little more. It says, How to Defend Yourself Against Narcissists. This is something I have heard so much. Like, God, the world we live in today has taken so many ancient words and stuff like that and just turned them upside down from what they used to mean and what they used to be. So let's talk about this word narcissist, because I feel like people are just throwing that word around all over the place when they have no idea what the origin of that word is or what it actually really means. High five to Max Collins for the random memberships in the chat. Man, that's awesome. Hooking it up in the chat room today. So let's check out this word narcissist, right? Now, if we look it up, it will say a person who has excessive interest or admiration in themselves, right? They're typically portrayed as like someone who just only thinks of themselves and stuff, right? Which does exist in this world today. You can see it all the time. Like, watch that channel Joey B versus the world, and you can see examples of that kind of narcissism in our world today. But this is interesting. It says narcissists who think that the world revolves around them. Interesting. Who does the world revolve around? Right? If not us individually, right? Who does it revolve around? And also, here's a question. Is it so bad to be enamored with yourself or to enjoy yourself or even to look in the mirror? When I was a kid, I looked in the mirror all the time because I wondered at my own appearance and why I looked this way and why I had certain mannerisms and why I spoke the way I did and why I acted the way I did. And oftentimes I would pretend and act differently just to just to see why I come back to this personality, to this persona. I could act anyway. I could have a different kind of voice. I could inflect my voice in different ways, but I'm not. I'm JayDreamerZ. I'm me. I have this frequency right now. And that I always wondered at that. Does that make me some selfish, self-absorbed narcissist? No. But does it make me a narcissist? In the old context? Yes. Because in the old context, that wasn't actually a bad thing, right? If you go back to the original root. This story comes from ancient Greek mythology that talks about the god Narcissus, right? And the story typically goes that, he was wandering. I'm going to give you the short version. He's wandering around, saw a pond, looked down into the pond. Some stories say that he scooped up water to drink. Okay. I don't believe he scooped up any water to drink, because this was a pool. This was stagnant water. Okay. He's not going to drink anybody like that has a halfway decent, reasoning ability is not going to drink out of a stagnant pool of water. So I don't really go for that one, but it's just a cartoonified story, right? So Narcissus sees his reflection in the water and stares in it, and he falls in love, and he's just so in love. Like he couldn't find a frequency that matched in the world that he lived in. He couldn't find a match, basically. And then he saw himself, and he loved that frequency. Just like I'll be honest, my channel is my favorite YouTube channel. Like, does that mean I'm self-absorbed and terrible and a bad person? No, it doesn't mean that at all, right? It just means that we find our vibe, right? We own ourselves. We find out who we are. It's the old axiom or whatever. Know thyself, right? Know, as in the biblical know, like love thyself. Know yourself truly. Accept who you are. You know what I mean? Be that person. Excuse me. Now, about Narcissus, it says in one story, he was unable to leave the allure of his image, and he eventually realized that his love could not be reciprocated, and he melted away from the fire of passion burning inside of him, eventually turning into a gold and white flower. Now, I think this is, I can't remember which version of the story this is, but most of the stories that we're familiar with, the popular ones, say that he fell into the water and drowned, which is also ridiculous. Like, what are you doing near the water? What are you doing in this pool if you can't swim? And how deep was that water? You're right on the water's edge. Are you in the deep end or something like that? It doesn't add up if you consider it to be an actual physical, real life, literal story of a person, a human being that walked by the water's edge. He's at a pool party and he goes to the pool and wants to drink some water and he falls in the deep end or whatever. Like this doesn't really add up. What it is a cartoonified reality. Okay. Something that actually happened energetically. So most of the times they'll say that he fell into the water and he drowned or he died, right? He went back down into the water and died. And in his place grew a gold and white flower. This is the story of the blue beam that I showed you earlier, right? That true vine that shoots up, right? If you look at the old maps, Mount Meru is surrounded by a giant crystal clear lake. That is the pool of Narcissus. That is the pool of Hermaphroditus and the pool of many other gods who, were near to these magical, energetic pools or whatnot, right? Max Collins, thank you again. So the blue beam will shoot up, right? And as long as it doesn't see its own reflection, right, it will live a long time. But the moment it sees its reflection, okay, symbolically speaking, it will drown. It will go back down into the waters and recede into the inner recesses of the earth to charge the good energy once more in order to release it later on, right? This is the whole story of Narcissus. So the question is, why does he turn into a gold and white flower? That blue beam, if it's Narcissus, when it retracts, remember, it's charging all of the atmosphere up there in the sky in the center of the world, basically. That the flower that is left over when Narcissus drowns or falls into the water or dies and goes into the underworld, right? Just like Jesus and stuff. The flower is a plasma afterglow. And it says here, a plasma afterglow, or just afterglow, is the radiation that is emitted from a plasma after the source of ionization is removed. What that means is that the electricity that shoots up into the sky charges everything around it. And when it's suddenly just sucked down back into the earth, the air is still charged, and the air still has plasma in it that is called an afterglow. So it creates not a solid beam or anything like that, but a ghostly image or leftover residual energetic properties that are afterglow, or a glowing neon plasma light, basically, that looks like a flower. This is also represented in the game Fortnite. Fortnite has all these huge live events that are happening and stuff, and right smack in the middle of Fortnite's map on this fictional island, okay? Fortnite's all about like our ancient hidden history and stuff. That's why I like playing it. Is this huge flower that grew up, and they call this spot where this flower grew up, in Fortnite the 0 point, right? The 0 is at the middle of the world because it's two things, right? One, it's the depressurization hole up in the sky at the middle of the world. And two, it's also a portal being the conical top of Mount Meru's, the plasma volcano, which is an entrance into the world. The 0 is right there in the middle, right? All right, let's move forward. Actually, hold on. I want to actually talk about the afterglow of the plasma real quick. It says that there are different types of plasmas. This one's called a remote plasma. Remote plasma refers to a plasma that is spatially separated from the external electromagnetic fields that initiate the discharge. So basically, if the discharge comes from the hollow recesses of our world, right, it is spatially separated once it gets to the surface level of our world. In an afterglow is a remote plasma if the plasma is channeled or goes through cavernous systems away from the original plasma source, right? It also says here, it's kind of hard to read, but it talks about temporal plasma, which is temporary plasma that is only affecting for a time, or on the macrocosmic scale for an age or for an eon, right? And it says here, an advantage that temporal plasma has over remote plasma, and I believe this is actually acting as both, is that it can be contained in a closed system, and thus makes controlling the temperature and the pressure easier. Temporal plasma is often used to replicate ionic reactions in atmospheric conditions in a controlled environment. So they use this type of a plasma in order to predict the weather or to set up, weather pattern guesses as to what the weather is going to be like and stuff like that, because the plasma at the middle of our world controls our weather. It helps to influence our weather, especially the closer you get to the Arctic Circle. That's why, Enki's brother is the wind god. Enlil is the wind god, or the god of the zephyr, the earthly wind that comes out, right? All right, getting back to the movie, we see Renfield and he's like, oh man, he starts choking. He's like, no, I swallowed a bug, which, that's probably the first thing he thought of because he is a bug eater. And he's like, unintentionally, right? He starts to get nervous. So he's like, just to let you know, I just swallowed it unintentionally. And then the girl says, what other way is there to, right? So even the movie is saying like, wait a minute, like, why would anyone purposefully eat a bug? That's what the movie is saying, right? The movie is basically saying, don't be a bug eater, okay? If you want to be a bug eater, totally fine. That's your choice. It's your decision, all right? But Renfield, while he is under the influence of the dragon, is a bug eater. He'll pop a bug in his mouth like it's a candy or popcorn, and he will get his jaundice superpower eyes or whatever, right? He'll get his what is it called? Not jaundice, but I forgot what the other disease is, but you know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah, he gets his jaundice superpowers. Anyways, now he goes in to fight these drug dealer dudes in this little warehouse type deal, and look behind him. What is that? Does anybody recognize what this particular animal? There's all these props in this warehouse where he is, right? He goes to kick some butt, pops a bug in, he gets his hepatitis superpower or whatever, right? And right behind him, you can see one of the many props that are actually in this warehouse. So what do you think this is? I'll tell you right now, it is a dog type creature, right? There's another reference to the dog, like we talked about earlier, right? Now, this is a specific dog. This is a famous dog in the old world. This is the mother to Romulus and Remus. As you can see, it's the exact same creature, right? This is the wolf that is said to have fed the founders of Rome. Romulus and Remus, right? Rome. Basically, it's life that was created by these electrical arcs that happen at the North Pole, okay, in the Garden of Eden area, right? So Romulus and Remus are said to have fed upon this wolf, which is symbolic of Mount Meru, right? It shoots up that blue beam, that plasma that charges the atmosphere, that creates a viscous liquid that falls down, and then it can dry out into wafers, and that's the manna of the ancient Hebrews and Phoenicians and whatnot. They eat this electrical particles, or they can even drink it as goo, which is like electrical byproduct. Whenever you have a strong electrical charge, ask any ghost hunter. They'll tell you that there is electrical discharge in the form of goo from ghosts. They'll just say it's ectoplasm, or they'll just give it some word or whatever. But what it is, it's a viscous substance that is electrically and energetically charged so much that when you eat it, it instantly has an effect on your body that rejuvenates you. And this is the food of the gods. This was the liquid of the gods, the drink of the gods. This was Mountain Dew. This was Frosted Flakes. This was the original food of the gods. So here's the drug dealers out in their warehouse, and they say that the drugs that we stole from your boss, so they think that, anyways, there's a standoff. But what I really want you to check out is like what's behind these dudes. You see this little statue over here? There's all these props, right? This is like an ancient Babylonian, Mesopotamian creature, or caricature, I should say, that you can see it's got like two horns up there. Zoom into it just a little bit here. It's got these wings, and it has the body of a bull and the face of a man, oftentimes. But originally, it was actually a goddess, and this creature was called a llama. So now, if you're wondering about all the llama symbolism, right? We've talked about the llama symbolism in the movies. Even in Fortnite, they have a llama. There's all this llama. A llama is an esoteric symbol. Okay, the word llama is related to the word lamp, and by extension, the word lamb, as in the Lamb of God, which also means lamp or light, basically, right? So if you check this out, this creature in the background right here was called a llama or a Llama-su. Okay, su is just a suffix. It's a Llama-su. So let's zoom in on this and read it real quick. It says here, initially depicted as a goddess in Sumerian times, when it was called Llama, it was later depicted from Assyrian times as a hybrid of a human, a bird, and either a bull or a lion, specifically having a human head, the body of a bull or a lion, and bird wings under the name Llama-su. So you'll see these things. These were often placed as a pair at the entrances of palaces, at the entrances of cities. They were sculpted in colossal sizes, and they were placed as a pair, a duo, right? One at each side of the door of the city that generally had doors in the surrounding wall. Each one looked toward one of the cardinal points. The reason why they faced the cardinal points is because they were electromagnetic in nature, I believe, right? And so they would naturally face, they would work with the magnetics of our world. So they face these cardinal points. There's two of them specifically because these are a type of anode and cathode energy that is on either side of Mount Meru itself, right? So these are guardian energetic forces. These were in the Bible, these would be described as like strange looking angelic creatures that, are an amalgam of different, humans and animals and birds and stuff like that, right? So this is a caricature drawing or a caricature carving of an energetic entity, right? This is really interesting to note too. Check out how many legs they have. No one really ever points this out, but if you count how many legs they have, I'll zoom out a bit, right? If you look at these legs, there's two in the front, there's two in the back, and there's another leg sticking. They have 5 legs. This is so interesting to me. I don't know why they have 5 legs. Also, this is interesting too. I'll teach you something about ancient, like when the Anunnaki are portrayed, or the ancient Sumerian gods or whatever. Count how many horns they have. This one has 3. Each horn is worth 10 points, basically. And the more points, the higher your ranking is, or the more import you have, the more value you have, you're more important, basically. It's the closer you get to Mount Meru, basically, right? So you can tell how close these things are because they have 3 horns. 5 is the max, I believe. Hey, speaking of Max, hey, Max just gave me $10 and did a little super chat sticker. Thank you so much, Max. All right, now in the movie there is a clan of gang members that they're the ones that made these drugs and stuff, and they're called the Lobos. Now you can see up here at the top of this this building. This building, first of all, you'll see this architecture. This architecture is just not because, oh, it looks beautiful, or they really needed these columns and pillars to like hold up the roof or whatever. They don't, okay? They could build this in many different ways, right? This is not just artistic in nature. It's artistic because it harkens to a truth. All good art forms harken back to a forgotten or esoteric or deeply held truth. And that's what makes for good art. And that's why good art survives the test of time. So the pillars, basically, right? The pillars that are underneath this triangular structure, which is the plasma volcano or Mount Meru, sometimes the all-seeing eyes put right there in the middle, right? And they have this lobo or wolf that's at the very top, right? The light, the wolf symbolism, the Mount Meru symbolism, the pillars of the world symbolism, etc. So let's look up the word wolf. You can see right here, it's got luk, voluku in ancient Slavic, Russian, volkeia, something, something. And then down here you see in Greek, lycos or likos, which means os means strong, right? Remember os, strong. Leek or luk. Luk means light. Loop also means light. So it depends on the pronunciation and the dialect. But basically a wolf is a creature that came from the light, right? Came up out of the plasma volcanoes or out of these cavernous entrances when those barriers were undone. Now this is interesting too. So this is written. There's a message that is written on the outside of this bad guy's hideout. Let me zoom in onto this message, see if we can read it a little better. It says, "Stop messing around. Better think of your future. Time to straighten right out. Creating problems in town." Why would they do that? I mean, look at the text, look at the font, look at the style. This was done, artistically, an actual thing. Now, it is lyrics to a ska song. The ska song, I didn't have it up here, but it was a message to Rudy, I think it was called, a message to Rudy. Rudy means red or ruddy, basically, right? So a message to those who are tempted by Dracula, a message to those who might, be inviting the vampires in the form of the frequencies into their lives. And it says straight up to us, stop messing around. You better think of your future. It's time to straighten right out. Straighten out. Instead of being that frequency that isn't straight, it's time to straighten it out like the blue beam. Basically, it's a warning to us, okay? It's a warning. Now, Renfield goes into this restaurant and he sees that there's this couple out on a date. This guy gives this girl a black rose, which is interesting. So what's the symbolism behind the black rose? They don't tell us in the movie, right? It could have been a red rose. Traditionally, that means love and relationships and stuff, but they chose as a prop, purposefully. A black rose is hard to find, so you know it's a prop, right? Black roses symbolize death or the end of something. Apocalyptic in nature in this movie. Black roses are good for expressing sorrow or condolences, right? Grief, hope in transformation, power and strength, unrequited love, forbidden desire, and desire for rebellion. So he looks over and he sees this symbol. He's reading the omens right now. He sees all these nuns, and these are all the people that Dracula wants to eat. Okay. So all of these people express bad qualities. Now there are infiltrators. Okay. So you might look at a group of nuns, and it depends on your perspective. You might see like, oh, they're religious. They're supposed to be nice. They're supposed to be kind. They're supposed to be chaste and pious, etc. Well, they're supposed to be. Okay, but those of you who actually have had experience going to schools where you were taught by nuns, especially if you're older, nuns are oftentimes bad news, okay? And also they wear all this black and white symbolism. Like the name of that restaurant was actually, it means black and white. So there's a lot of black and white symbolism in this movie too. Black and white is the color for space travelers, okay? So the dark worlds, or the black squares on the chessboard, is our worlds, the covered worlds, the dark cities, and the white is the whiteness of space, the brightness of the heavens. So he sees them, and then this bus full of cheerleaders go by. Also, if you've ever been a cheerleader or stuff like that in school, like that's not the most pious energy, is, being like involved in football or cheerleading or stuff like that. Okay. So anyways, now we get those gang members, the Lobos, they actually wear these wolf masks. You know what I mean? And then the leader actually will take his mask off So it's not like they needed these masks or anything. It's not like they're trying to conceal their identities. But what they're showing you is that there's always a correlationship between vampires and werewolves. Just like I talked about on a few of my different videos, that werewolves are direct descendants that they are not ancestors. They're related, basically. They're in the same house. All right, it's the Montagues, the Capulets, the werewolves, the vampires. They're all the same. All right, now, Robert Montague Renfield is what his full name is, right? It's not just Renfield, that's his last name. So let's break down that full name, because the movie was so kind and felt it was important enough to give us his entire name. Let's break down his entire name. Robert, we have broken that one down quite a few times, right? It comes from Hrod, which means famous, and then Bert, or Bert, you could say, which means bright, right? Famous light, basically, is what it is. A light that is of famous notoriety. Not just any old light, but a famous light is what Robert means, basically. Max Collins, thank you so much. High five. It'll probably show up here in just a second, but I saw you in the chat. All right, so Robert means famous light. Montague, what does Montague mean, right? Remember there was the Montagues and the Capulets, right? All the same story over and over again. The name Montague means hill or mont, and agu, which means pointed. So a pointed hill, Mount Meru symbolism, the plasma volcano, the pointed hill, right? So we've got famous light, pointed hill, and then of course his last name means the valley or the plain of the crow, which is also the plain of the beam, right? So a famous light from the pointed hill in the plain of the beam. This dude full on represents those people that come from or go to the sacred island at the middle of the world, which is an island of protection, which is a garden of paradise, which is Eden, which is Hyperborea, and many other names for it, right? All right, so he meets this cop. She's a good cop, believe it or not. Like, she's a good one. She's a part of the remnant. She just got, somehow she got tricked into joining police force and all that stuff. And she's going to start questioning, just like he questions who he works for. Right? He's a thrall. He's a slave of the devil. He's a slave of that satanic energy or that bad energy or that dragon energy, the Dragul energy. She is the exact same thing. She is also of the good vibe tribe in the movie. It's just that she doesn't like her bosses. She hates the people that she got tricked into working for, right? So he makes this mention. He's like, oh yeah, I am a veteran of the Great War. And he kind of lets it slip, which reminds me of that Great War reference that was in Cabin in the Woods, right? The Great War is the Titanomachy. It's a 10-year war between the new generation of Greek gods and the older generation of the Titans, right? Or those who have superpowers versus the giants themselves, who don't tend to have superpowers, but they are giant in nature, right? Then Dracula shows, what was the dude's name? Oh yeah, Renfield. Dracula shows Renfield his plans. Bad guys always tend to show people their plans. They always, instead of just killing the good guys, they always go over their whole plans and stuff like that. That's because they want to instill fear. They get off on telling people what kind of bad things to expect instead of just killing them, because it's really they're vampires. They're energetic vampires. They want people to be afraid. They soak in that energy. They want to transition your energy from a good vibration to a bad vibration. That's why the bad guys are constantly just giving away their plans, because they're trying to scare you, because they feed off. They don't want you dead. They want to transition you into something else that they gain from, that they benefit from. Killing you is just a last resort. You know what I mean? Like, they don't gain much just from killing people. But if they keep them alive and the person produces like a crop negative energy, because they're so scared or whatever, then yes, then they keep you alive and they tell you all their messed up plans. So these are Dracula's messed up plans for world domination. And we can zoom in on this for just a bit. You can see there's all this different writing. Like this one says, remove all art that depicts man's accomplishments. That's interesting. So these are all parts of his plans and stuff. Remind them of their shortcomings. Break down security. What does that one say? Make them feel worthless. This is Dracula, or symbolically, this is Dracula, right? Now, this depiction for his world domination reminded me of a place in California where giant trees grow. So they're called sequoias. We sort of take them for granted for some reason in the modern world today. The redwoods of old, the sequoias, these are giant trees. These are the trees that once used to grow all over the place in the world when they had access to that positive blue beam energy. They would grow to gigantic sizes, right? So directly under Sequoia National Park in California, there is a cave system that's called the Crystal Cave. It is locked right now. It's actually off limits and closed right now. But it is locked. When it's locked up, it's this gate. It's a spider web gate. So it looks, that's kind of what that reminded me of, even Dracula's little symbol right there in the middle, right? They put a spider right there in the middle because this is energetic in nature. You go through into the cave systems and there's energy down there, which is why all these cave systems are off limits. They don't want you and I, the general population, to have access to the earth energy that can help you to live longer, that can heal you, that can has so many different byproducts. They will say it's to keep you safe, or to keep the cave safe, which is just ridiculous, right? They don't want you to, don't touch the cave. Your fingerprint might just destroy all of this thousands of years of God's work or whatever. That's garbage. It's a cave. It's a rock. It's already stood the test of time of how many thousands of years, right? Your fingerprints and the oil that's on your hand is not going to build up over time and just destroy a cave or whatever. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Okay. They don't want you to touch it because they don't want you to gain power from it. That makes more sense to me. But anyways, back to the Crystal Cave in California is in the Western Sierra Nevada of California and is one of at least 240 known caves in Sequoia National Park, but this is the only one that is accessible to the public. Now, you're all watching in the live stream from various parts across the world, right? How many of you, just by a show of emojis, how many of you also in your local regions have vast cavernous systems with hundreds and hundreds of, cave access systems or whatever that are all closed off? And maybe they'll open one off for the general public, which, by the way, they will charge you. They will charge you. They will take the charge from you. Instead of you getting to go down into these caves that are off limits and getting a charge and receiving a charge and being empowered, they will actually take a charge from you. They will take your currency or your current or your energy in the form of money, which is all ridiculous. And they will charge you to go down into a selected cave that usually has other branches inside of it that are also off limits because, they have their reasons or whatever. How many other people, right? Tammy George raises her hand in the chat. I see there's probably a lot of you, I would guess, right? The Grand Canyon is no exception, right? Anyways, so we get back to this little truther community of, people that are in this self-help group. And this girl is like, my life is like a never-ending hallway of funhouse mirrors, but all the clowns are me. So she's sort of being metaphoric in nature, right? But this her life being a never-ending hallway of funhouse mirrors, it's sort of a labyrinth symbolism. It's a maze symbolism. That's our world. We live inside of a world which is always shifting the directions and how to get to the center of the maze. The directions are shifting, okay? Every time we go through an apocalyptic shift, the walls move. The magnetism moves. The North Pole right now isn't even north. It's south. I don't know if you know that, but the north end of a compass needle is supposed to point south, not north. It's not going to be attracted to the same exact thing, right? So the North Pole is actually the South Pole right now. That's just one example. The seasons shift, everything changes, the orientation of the stars change, the earth is terraformed every single time. So it's a shifting maze that we live in. All the clowns as well. This is the killer clown symbolism too. So those beings that drop down, those fractalverse travelers that come down from above, that float down or fall down, the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, etc., they're portrayed as being killer clowns, oftentimes even with red hair, red giants, red-haired, white, pasty, white-skinned, albino-looking creatures. Now, whenever they put makeup on, right, to actually look more like us, which is ironic, they'll put on makeup and stuff to look more like us so they don't look so grotesque and scary, right? So they do themselves up or whatever. They look like clowns. So these are actually the killer clowns, oftentimes wearing attire that will keep them protected from sunlight, like this ridiculous fluffy collar that Pennywise is wearing, right? So these are all examples of the elven race, the El, the ancient gods of old, or those giant creatures that floated down from other worlds in the fractalverse. And they are pasty, pale-skinned, usually depicted as killers or whatnot. This is the killer clowns from outer space symbolism, right? And you see this all over the place. Oftentimes they'll wear red. They have the hook symbolism. They come from space. You know what I mean? They've dropped down from above, etc. And this is also the reason why so many of the ancient tribes across the world paint themselves up to look like these ancient old gods that came down that had all this information. And I'm not saying they were all bad either, right? Some of these tribes probably worshipped the good, tribes. I'm sure there's good and bad within these. I don't want to say that any creature from space is all evil, okay? But history teaches that many of them seem to be, right? So some of our tribal members who met these ancient gods or whatever, they would put this white, stuff all over their faces and stuff, and they would try to emulate the ancient gods. This is the elven standard of beauty. They tried to make themselves have longer necks and larger heads and whiter skin and, stuff like that. And this is how they're depicted even on the ancient glyphs and the rocks of old. These white creatures that came from space, white devils, if you will, right? Not that they're all bad, okay? But in general, that seems to be what, we have experienced from our experience, okay? All right, so we get back to Renfield, and he's talking about Dracula, and everyone thinks that Dracula is just like his regular slave job boss or whatever. And he's like, he thinks that he can take over the world. He can take over the world, right? So it's basically Satan. It's basically the devil. It's basically that energy signature in our world that has taken over right now. Okay, there's a bad energy as the blue energy has left and is being pulled in to the bowels of our world. What's left is that resident evil energetic field. Now, this guy who's in charge of the group says, well, he's a narcissist, Renfield. Like, that's just, yes, there's two types of narcissists, okay? There's the devil and there is Jesus, basically. Or, I'm just using those as examples. There's good and bad, okay? The bad narcissists are people who are just like all self-absorbed and they don't care about anyone else and they don't consider anyone else to be extensions of themselves. They just see everybody else as being lesser and they're the most important thing ever. That is the satanic evil form of narcissism. The good form of narcissism are those who look inside, those who look within, those who consider and wonder at themselves and see the value that they have as an individual, but they also project that individual value onto others because they realize that others are extensions of themselves. So it's okay. It's totally okay if you wonder at yourself, if you love yourself, if you treat yourself good, and take care of yourself. That's the good side of narcissism. There's always a polarity. So he says, we all know exactly how you feel because they're dealing with narcissists or whatever. He says, you can't get them out of your head, right? That is a frequency. That is a vibe. Okay. You can't get this bad energetic, bad thoughts or whatever out of your head. Oh, and you feel like he could kill you with a snap of his fingers or whatever, right? Yes. That's being plasma possessed. Okay. That red plasma from above wants to kill. That's its whole mission. He controls rats with his mind. One guy says, right? And everyone kind of looks at him. And the leader's like, he's on medication. Basically, don't listen to him. However, the crazy guy is right. Okay. He can control rats with his mind. Rats are symbolic of the humans that live in this world, okay? We went over that when we broke down Shutter Island. And maybe even Indiana Jones' Last Crusade. I think we had some rat symbolism in that one too. But anyways, controlling with the mind. It's the Pied Piper, okay? The Pied Piper represents that bad energy that comes into this world and leads all of the rats or whatever. Now, the good energy can also be a type of Pied Piper, okay? So it's just people following the energetic field of the world. Now, he says, Renfield, this is codependency 101. People say 101. They say all this stuff. They don't really know what it means, okay? All of us are under like a strong delusion. We're under a spell. We're just regurgitating spells that we have heard. But when we get down to the specifics of the actual words, we have no idea where they come from. We don't know what their origins are. We don't really know what they mean. We just feel a vibe from it. So 101. We talked about the 0 point earlier, right? The passageway, the entrance, the seppuku, the portal, either into the world or out of this world, right? That's the O in 101. The one on either side are the anode and the cathode on either side of that entrance. It's the 101. It's the beginning. That's why beginning classes are called 101, because that's the beginning of the earth. That's the middle of the earth where life begins and where life ends as well. Okay, so it's anode, entrance, cathode. That's the 101, the beams that shoot up on either side that create an electrical arc or the arc of the covenant, etc. All right, so he says, I'm going to grow to full power, right? So he represents those of us who are the remnant of the blue beam. He also represents the blue beam itself, who needs to grow to full power. That's what it's doing right now, okay? That blue beam is not in the world right now. It's not at full power. Once it does get to full power, once we get to full power, then we'll go through a polarity shift and the world will change for the better. Now, right after he says he's going to grow to full power, what does he do? He goes to the tower, or a place called the tower that has a form of a symbolic blue beam shooting straight up, and it says tower on it, right? It couldn't be more obvious to me that this is Mount Meru symbolism. So if you want to grow to full power, get to Mount Meru, okay? Survive and get your ass to Mars, like it says in what's that movie with the Terminator dude? Anyways, you know what I'm talking about. All right, so he goes to the tower, which is just his apartment complex, and he buys all this stuff to start cleaning. He also buys those exact same type of narcissus flowers. They're in the family called narcissus, basically, which are white with like yellow in the middle, right? So he buys those exact same type of flowers that represent him anyway. And what does he do? He does what Janus does. He does what the janitor god does, and he starts cleaning up, because that blue beam, ionized oxygen, will desanitize, or it will sanitize the world. It will start cleaning up, filling everything with oxygen, and it will help to clean our world. So he starts to clean up his apartment or whatever. He's got all these like inspirational posters, which I thought were interesting. One actually has a labyrinth. So let me zoom out a bit. You see at the top, there's the labyrinth that has the goal, or the center is in the middle. The exit point is in the middle of this circular type of labyrinth. The waffle symbolism, that sort of fractalverse out there in space, looks more like waffles and like entrances and corridors, kind of like you see in that movie where they have the Tesseract and they go through the Tesseract or whatever out there in space. I forgot what it was called, but anyways, all these inspirational things, because that's what he's starting to do. And this is what we should start to do as well, is to focus on the good news. Like, accept that the world's crap, right? Don't be like, you know, don't just pretend like it's not, right? But accept that, but focus on the inside. Focus on the good things. Feed yourself good things. Listen and take in the good things, and just keep the bad things out as we focus on what's really important during these times. So as a part of cleaning up his lifestyle and breaking away from the influence of Dracula the dragon, what does he do? He opens up his little coffin container that he keeps his bugs in, and he lets them all go. It's kind of hard to see the bugs in this picture because they're all tiny, but he lets go of the bugs. He stops being a bug eater. Okay. And then just to do some more context for the blue beam, he does the whole Atlas shrug. Okay, that's what it's called, basically. That's what I'm gonna call it. This is the Atlas pose. Okay, the Atlas shrug. That's the blue beam. It's the Y. It's the flux capacitor. That's what the blue beam looks like as it shoots up. It's the Irminsul. It shoots up. This is Jesus hanging on the cross. This is Odin hanging on the tree. This is letting us know that that's who he is. Also, you'll notice that he painted a lot of the apartment orange, right, on the outside portions, and then his bedroom is green. The orange represents survivors. The orange represents those who make it into the Orange Age, or the Golden Age, right? Oh my God, thank you so much. Amazing man and father. Bam. Thank you, Max. Man, I'm going to keep on going, but thank you so much, Max. I really appreciate you splashing the popcorn so hard. And then the green obviously represents the North Pole, right? The heart chakra, the middle of the world. So we get back to this cop. Now, this is going to be really interesting. This is going to hit home for a lot of you. It did hit home for me, okay? First and foremost, she realizes that her organization of cops, or police officers, I can't stand. That's me, okay? But they're corrupt. The whole organization is corrupt from the top down. They have been infiltrated. The reason they wear blue, the reason they're called the boys in blue, is because they're supposed to represent the remnant. They're supposed to represent the people who still have that energetic signature that's good, but they have been infiltrated, just like every remnant or every organization that's supposed to, outwardly say, hey, we're the remnant, we're the blue beam, we're the good guys, they have been infiltrated and taken over by the red, okay, or the red spectrum, the bad, the negative, etc. So she walks into all these cops in the place where she works, and she says, you guys don't think that I know what's going on here? I don't know how many of you jerks are on the Lobos payroll. So basically she realizes, wow, everyone she works for is corrupt. They're all bad. They're working for the Lobos. They're working for the fallen angels. They're working for Dracula, essentially, because he's in control of all of them. Now, look back here real quick. Don't solve the crime until overtime. That's what it says in its full. Don't solve the crime until overtime. That means all they care about is money. That's all they care about. They can be bought. They can be bought out. It's all about, like they're giving out tickets and stuff. They're really just charging people. That's what they're doing. All right. That's why they don't arrest all the homeless people that are committing crimes and stuff, is because they don't have any money. They can't pay anything, They actually love it when they go to jail because they get free food and a place to stay and stuff. So they don't arrest a lot of homeless people when they actually commit crimes, right? Don't solve the crime till overtime. She says, you're all corrupt. You're all on the payroll. Now, could this possibly be happening in our world? Yeah, I'll show you an example of it here in just a second. So, Renfield walks up to her. Now, in this scene, he represents the blue beam, okay, of Mount Meru. And this is a conversation between the blue beam and us, the remnant, people who have slave jobs, people who have been caught up in a corrupt and bad system, people who have been caught up in bad frequencies and bad vibrations. And he says he recognizes this. And I want to recognize all of you. Okay, I'm looking in the chat. I'm looking into you, future people who are watching. You need to be recognized if you're a good person. You need to be recognized when you contribute, when you do good things, when you help people out, when you act and do things that are acts of heroism. Okay. He says, you stood up for everyone who's ever lived in fear of the powerful forces that are shaping their lives. You stood up. You stood against that. That's not easy to do these days because we become targets. We get humiliated and we suffer. And that's not easy to do, to stand up when most of the world is evil and upside down. He says, now it's important because when people like you stop, then that's when the monsters take over. Okay, so that's internally, that's whenever everything just gets bad, there's no hope left. Okay, but physically, that's when actual monsters come into this world because the world has had enough. Mother Nature has enough. There's no more good people. There's no one righteous. No, not one, as the Bible would say. And there's only a remnant left, right? So whenever people stop standing up for what is good and what is loving and pure and kind, that's when actual physical monsters, nightmare creatures, will physically actually come back to our world and be reintroduced as we go through a polarity shift and the doors and the portals of the sky and the earth open back up and otherworldly creatures flood on in. And then this is a message for you. This was a message also for me as I was watching, but we are together and we are a part of a remnant, okay? We're spread out like seeds across the world. And it says, this is to the lost tribes. This is to the lost boys, like Peter Pan's lost boys. And he says, you're not lost, okay? You might feel like you're lost. You might be wandering around for quite some time, but there's purpose to it. You're not lost. You're placed, okay? You're an inspiration to other people. And that's why we're spread out, so that we can grow and reach so many people who are lost. We're not the lost ones. We have light. We're lights in the dark. We're not lost at all. The rest of the world is. And they look at us and they consider us to be the lost boys or the wackos or crazies or yahoos or whatever, but we're not. We're guides. All right, so the gang members of the wolf tribe, they go into Dracula's lair. Dracula's lair is also green, with red right there in the middle, which symbolizes that Mount Meru, or the North Pole, has been taken over by that negative red spectrum energy as it is today. Okay, that's why there's an evil god that's in charge of this world today or whatever, or an evil energetic force or frequency, and it will reverse. And one day that will change. Okay. Excuse me. Now, okay, Dracula, right? Dracula, Renfield thought that he could just like go, go to IKEA and try to be a regular person and try to live a regular human life or whatever. And he stopped showing up at Dracula's house, which was this hospital, this abandoned hospital. Now Dracula's like, oh, okay. He goes to Renfield's apartment and he's inside. And Renfield's shocked because vampires cannot come into your house. Your house is your physical body if you internalize this, okay? It's also the house of our world, right? So when we start acting up and acting crazy and our world needs to be cleaned, we are basically sending out a signal collectively to the cosmos, send help. Okay, so send energetic forces to come electrocute and shock our world and change everything so that we can be cleansed. But on a small scale, right, there's the actual house that you live in. Vampires cannot come in traditionally unless they're invited. So Renfield looks back at his front door and it says, welcome, come on in. And he's like, God dang it, I shouldn't have put that there. Because basically he just welcomed in the bad energy. There's something to be learned from this. Be careful about what you welcome into your life. Be careful about what you welcome into your circle. I know we live during a time where we're just supposed to be so accepting of everybody and so accepting of bug eaters and, whatever. Like, I'm not going to eat it. Forget that. I'm not inviting that into my house. Be careful what you put into your body. Be careful what you invite into your house. You know what I mean? Like this applies on all levels, from the deepest level of internalizing it to the house of our, to the house of our world, right? Be careful what you invite into your house. He says, you're the monster, Renfield, not me. I'm not the monster. Okay. This is the accuser. In the devil, this is what the Bible would call the accuser. Okay. This is that energy that gets into people's heads and has them focusing on bad stuff to cause depression and anxiety and make people feel bad about their past and decisions that they've made and feel like they can't change and feel like they're scum and feel like they deserve to die or they deserve whatever bad things happen. So you might as well just keep doing bad things because, I'm not going to get to heaven because I'm evil or I don't deserve any rewards. That's garbage. You deserve everything. Okay. I'm speaking to all of you. Okay. Because ultimately we all deserve whatever we are. Okay. So if you have good energy inside, if you aspire for the better things in life and you choose that and desire that for others, you deserve what you want for others. You deserve a good life. You deserve wealth and prosperity and happiness and, nourishment and health and stuff like that. You deserve all of the best things in the world. And if it hasn't come your way yet, hold on and survive and make it through the apocalypse. I'm talking about the apocalypse, right? I mean, this applies on all levels, but don't give up. Hold on, okay? You're not the monster. The monster is in the world today and it's all over the place, okay? You're the hero of the story. Who put these ideas in your head, huh? This is basically, I feel like he's talking to me, right? I feel like he's actually coming out of the screen right now, trying to influence us still with his little vampire hands. Who put these ideas into your heads, huh? Was it JayDreamerZ? What are you reading? Ancient Oblivion, the Plasma Apocalypse? Max Collins. Thanks, Max. So, who did put the ideas into his head? Live Spring Church. The spring that wells up inside of each of us, right? The remnant of that blue beam. But check out the symbol there, right? That right there is the circle with the cross, which is in the ancient world known as the Tet. It's the X-Men, the people who have power, who come from the X island at the middle of the world. This is the map I was making reference to throughout this presentation, right? This is the Forgotten Land that's not on any of our modern maps in the Arctic Circle region any longer, right? Right. We are the Tet. All right. We are the remnant. Now, he goes back. Dracula goes into the little self-help group because he's pissed that these people are trying to influence Renfield to take away the one that works for him, the one that does all of the work for him. Dracula does like no work. He's lazy. He just sits around and just eats, and he benefits off of our work. Energetically speaking, there's an energy out there that has put us into slavery, right? We are controlled by many different things in this life that are bad for us, and we're slaves, and we add because it has an effect on us, and it changes our frequency, and we throw out more negative energy, which increases the power of the evil one or whatever. So Dracula, or the dragon, goes into this meeting, the self-help group, and he's like, would you like to introduce yourself to the group? and he's talking to Dracula. And Dracula's like, oh, well, I'm the Prince of Wallachia. Wallachia, or Wallachia, however you want to pronounce it. I'm the Prince of Wallachia. Now, that is actually a title that was held by a real person in history, a historic figure. The Prince of Wallachia was also known as Vlad. Vlad, aka Vlad the Impaler, right? Who took the title of Dragul from his father. His father, this is Vlad III, represented right here. He was known as Vlad the Impaler, who actually put stakes. Now, he's supposed to represent a vampire, right? But he's the one who is putting stakes through other people. Now, the stake goes through the heart of the bad guys. Do you see how the paradigms are all flipped upside down and messed up? No wonder so many people are enamored with vampires, right? And you know, things that most people would consider to be evil or gothic or scary or bad, or, you know, horror movies and stuff like that, because the world's upside down. There's a lot of truth to these things, right? Vlad was a hero, okay? At least to his people, okay? He fought against the Ottomans. Otto means rich people, basically. All right, he impaled them, putting stakes and beams through them, right, through their hearts. So it comes from Vlad Tepes. That's his real name, okay? Vlad the Third, I believe. His father was also named Vlad. It says he was a national hero of Romania. Remember the Romulans? Or not Romulans, but they are Romulans. But Romulus and Remus, the Romulans, right? Who fed from the wolf or whatever, right? This is all related. It's all the never-ending story. So, a national hero of Romania. Vlad Dracul, the second son of Vlad Dracul. Now, Vlad Dracul, the second, his father, had won the moniker of Dracul from his membership in the Order of the Dragon, a quote-unquote secret society, okay? Not really a secret society, but a society that has secrets, right? A militant fraternity founded by Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary. The Order of the Dragon was dedicated to halting the Ottoman, the rich people, the Ottoman advance into Europe. The Ottomans demanded that Vlad Dragul, or Dragul, they just say Dragula, right? Dracula. They insisted that he pay taxes. That he and his people just continue to give the rich people more money to just make them more rich so they don't have to do anything. If you're in England, you know exactly how these people must feel, right? So, the Order of the Dragon required its initiates to defend the cross and to fight against the enemies of Christianity, particularly the Ottoman Empire. The Draguls, the Order of the Dragon, were Christians. Like, can you imagine? The people who are portrayed as vampires and so afraid of the cross, and you put the stakes inside of them, they're the ones who are actually Christians and loved the cross and staked other people. Bad people. Isn't this interesting how upside down things have become? And then he says, let's eat. His eyes get all plasma possessed and stuff. Now, there's truth on both sides, just so you know. Okay, so I'm not saying that vampires are all Christians and good people or anything like that. I'm just saying there's balance. Okay, there's two sides to every story. We should consider that. So he says, let's eat, right? He plays a pretty good vampire. He says, all right, now, he tears up all those people, kills all the people in the self-help group, and he's talking to one of the gang leaders in the Lobo family, the wolf family, right? And he says, and can the family raise me soldiers? Can they raise him soldiers, right? He wants the Lobos to raise him soldiers. He says, and the impalement of all who oppose it. So this is another, Vlad the Impaler reference, basically, right? And he looks up, he's like, yeah, we can. I can make a couple calls. We can raise you up an army, So the energy that's in our world is spreading, okay? It's recruiting. It's strongly influencing anyone who is in this world, and it hates anything that opposes that energy because its goal is collection. It wants to create a collective energy, right? I mean, that's the goal of both sides, really. So this guy stands up. He's like, yeah, I'll help you out. Please don't kill me, Dracula. And then he's like, He does this crazy Nick Cage psycho laugh. And then the bad guy's like, are you happy or are you going to mess me up? Like, I can't tell what's going on here. And then he's like, and he's still laughing, but he's looks pretty Nick Cage crazy, right? So this dude's not sure. Like, is this good or are you about to eat me, right? There's a super funny part in the movie. All right. Anyways, now check this out. Let's hit home for a second. Okay. Let's shift gears. Let's hit home. The cops in the movie are corrupt from top to bottom. There is only a remnant. There's only a few of them who are still good, which is represented by that female. Now, the cops are called on the female because the female tried to tell on all the cops. And she's telling all the cops, you're all corrupt, you're all bad, you're the ones who deserve to be in jail. And guess what they do? All units, you have the green light. The green light. They're given the green light to commence attack on one of their own. So, because one of their own was going to blow the whistle on all of the rest of their department or whatever and tell everybody like, hey, they're all corrupt, they're all bad, they're all working for Dracula and stuff. It's portrayed as if this is fiction, right? Here she is, trapped in an apartment complex or in a house, surrounded by cops who are all corrupt and out to kill her, right? Here they come pulling up and they have this huge firefight. This has happened in our world and does happen quite often, right? Whenever one of their own rises throughout the ranks and decides to report the rest of them for being corrupt individuals, they go out on manhunts to try to basically just kill and murder these people. They don't want to bring them to justice because if they bring them to justice, they'll talk. They'll have something to stand on so that people can listen. And they don't want people to listen to the truth that these people are spitting about how corrupt these organizations are and how about how they just blatantly hurt people. They break all of the laws. They are above the laws. And whenever one of their own comes out and says, hey, I realize this, man. I feel bad. I want everyone to know. They go out on manhunts. This has happened in the past. And actually, when it did happen, this is just one example, okay? It says here that the sheriff has asked all members of the press to stop tweeting immediately. It's hindering officer safety. Like, yeah, please stop telling everyone what we're doing, right? They basically start issuing out these ordinances and orders and stuff to stop information, stop talking about what's really going on in these places, right? It says, here's an example of a guy, I won't say his name just because I don't want my video flagged, but it says he was a former LAPD officer who was fired after filing a report of excessive force against a superior in 2007. So basically, one of his higher-ups, he went to go tell on, I had this exact same experience in the military, okay? So this is why I'm so passionate about it, okay? This happened to me, not this exact same thing, but similar circumstances happened to me in the military often, all the time, and it just... it irritated the hell out of me. I hated it. I couldn't stand it, man. And they're all in the little boys club or whatever. They're all rubbing elbows with one another. They all protect one another because they're all corrupt and they don't want to lose their power. They don't want to lose their privilege. So they fire people. They set people up. They make people look bad. They will, and if none of that works, they get rid of them. Now, here's a little clip from that particular individual's manifesto, which could be real or not. And he says, they terminated me for telling the truth of a Caucasian officer that was kicking a mentally ill man as being disgusting. Like, he was just disgusted. They were beating people up for no reason. He says, those of you who go along to get along, right? You've heard of those people who are just cowardly, people that see other people being beaten up, taken advantage of, spit on, killed, murdered out in public, and you stand by and you just record it, or you watch, or you laugh, even worse, right? I've seen videos of people doing that, like on airplanes, people are acting crazy in the background, and people are like doing a little selfie, trying to act all slick, like we don't know you're just sitting there doing nothing, sitting on your butt, just recording it all, right? Doing nothing. He says, those of you who go along to get along have no backbone and destroy the foundation of courage. You are the enablers of those who are guilty of misconduct. You are just as guilty as those who break the code of ethics and the oath that you swore. Basically, if you're doing nothing about it, you're enabling the people who are acting badly, right? This little part also is from the manifesto. It says, I am here to correct and calibrate your moral compasses to true north. This particular individual they chased him. There was a manhunt. Okay. They weren't trying to bring him to justice. They didn't want to arrest him or anything. It was, there was a call put out to murder this individual. And there's many stories like this across the world. Okay. They cornered him up in Big Bear, up in the mountains in a cabin. And then they threw a bunch of incendiary devices into that cabin and basically told him, if you step out of this cabin, we will shoot you anyway. So you can burn to death in the cabin. Does this sound like positive energy? Does it sound like blue beams to you? Does it sound like anything that's good, like the remnant of the good energy? Christian, Christ-like, Buddha, anything? No. No, this is bad. These are the infiltrators. Every picture of this dude's face was all over the news. And I was so upset when I saw this story, especially how it was being portrayed and twisted on the news. You know what? The one thing they could not hide was this dude's smile. They could not find a bad picture. Usually they try to find the worst picture of the people as they can to try to make them look really horrible, right? Every picture of this dude, he's beaming, man. He's so full of goodness and good energy. Like every picture of him looks just like this. They cornered this dude and they set this place on fire, having no idea if there was anyone else in this cabin or not. And this is a trend. This is what the governments of your world do when their backs are against the law and they're facing somebody who might have an alternative lifestyle, alternative opinion, a different mode of living, right? And they try to just leave the system alone and live on their own. They don't tolerate that. They burn it down. Okay. So that's a big fat, be careful, from me to you. Okay. All right. Anyways, now we go back to this dude. Remember, he was he becomes the new familiar to, he basically made a deal with the devil. All right. He becomes the new familiar instead of Renfield. Renfield decides he wants to cut ties with Dracula. So this is the new familiar, and there's this like centipede that comes out of his sleeve, and instead of eating it, he's a drug addict, so he snorts it. And then this bug, he's basically a bug eater, okay? And his entire gang devoted themselves to Dracula, so they all become familiars and all eat bugs. Do you see a trend of the symbolism that the movie is trying to convey to you, right? You might, if you consider changing your diet, good, great. A lot of people have said, hey, Jay, I appreciate that video you made about giant ocean bugs. Totally changed the way I eat. So I think that's good, okay? If you still want to eat bugs and stuff, that's fine, whatever. I'm not saying you're a bad person, but I'm saying there are influences that are strong influences out there. Be careful, okay? So he gets his hepatitis superpowers after eating his bugs, and so does the rest of his gang, okay? All these guys, they all have Sith eyes. They all have jaundice superpowers. Mobsters and Lobsters. There's actually, this is a real place. There's a tour in Boston that you can take called Mobsters and Lobsters. There's an association with bug eaters and bad. You know what I mean? I'm not saying you're bad. I'm just saying there is an association with giant sea bugs, which are lobsters, which are bottom feeders, and mobsters, which are gang members and bad guys traditionally, right? It's called Mobsters and Lobsters in Boston. It's they take you on a tour of the city and they tell you about all the bad stuff that's happened in Boston, and you eat like a big bug dinner, I guess, on the bus or whatever. Anyways, so we get back to Renfield, who is about to be attacked, him and the woman cop. They're both about to be attacked by Dracula, but she took some of the cocaine that was on the ground and she made a circle, and she said this spell and she cast a protection circle. So Renfield says, is that a protection circle? Well, yeah, duh. Like, what else could it be, right? It's this blue beam that shoots up out of the ground and it traps Dracula up in the sky, just like we saw at the beginning of the movie, right? So there's this protection circle. She uses cocaine in the movie, but traditionally a protection circle is used with like salt and things that are similar, like alkaloids and stuff like that. So if you look up salt, sodium chloride or table salt is an insulator and does not conduct electricity, right? So if an electrical field tries to get through or like under your door, that's why people pour salt under the door of their cracks so that plasma cannot come in. Same reason they put horseshoes or horseshoe magnets above their doors. They don't want that red plasma to come in when the world's electrically charged. They don't want that energy to come in and possess them and zap them and, turn them into thralls or whatever. So they poured salt on the ground. If you pour the salt in a circle around you, you create you create a sort of a barrier around yourself that protects you, or you can trap in electrical energies inside of that circle as a protection circle, as they're doing, right? Now, that's when the salt's dry, I should say, okay? Right? A conductor is a material that allows electrons to flow freely through it, making it useful for carrying an electrical current. An insulator is a material that resists the flow of electrons, so it does not allow electrical currents to pass through it. So dry salt acts as an insulator, but if you get salt wet, a solution of salt in water is readily conductive. And if you have that in a circle and the salt is wet around you and plasma tries to come in through the ground or whatever, right? It will touch that and it will create a circuit. It will get stuck as an Ouroboros and just keep on going around and around and around and around, which is not the best way to do that, because that also means you're trapped, right? It's not going to get in if it's wet. So the best idea is to use dry salt if you're into that type of a thing. Anyways, so they look up at Dracula, which is the red plasma that's trapped by that blue beam energy from Mount Meru. And they say, any last wishes? And they're talking to the dragon, the great dragon, the devil of old. They say, any last wishes? And he says, I wish to spend a season in hell, where all the amusing people are. Ha 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 ha. And then he laughs or whatever. So this is taken right out of the Bible. The devil, the energy of our world, will spend a season in hell, in the earth. Okay. Right now, the blue energy is in hell. It's inside of Sheol. It's inside of Tartarus. It's down inside the bowels of the earth, charging, right? And when it's released, there's an energetic flip, which means the energy above has to take its place, and the devil gets locked into the bottomless pit, basically. So they start smashing the heck out of him, right? So the remnant wins. They destroy the bad energy or whatever, and they destroy Dracula. They cut him up into 1 million pieces, and they pour all those pieces into concrete, and then they like put the concrete into like cubes, and then they dump it all inside of like some drain or something like that. And he says, I'm not even sure 100% if this will kill him. This is just like Jason Voorhees, right? The reason that Jason Voorhees lives forever is because he is the same red plasma spirit. Boogled! Hey, thank you, Boogled. He's filled with that same energy. That's why Jason Voorhees comes to life when lightning hits his grave or whatever, right? And the reason they cannot die and they keep coming back is because they represent a cyclical nature of apocalyptic events of our world, right? Just like the good guys will always come back in a time when they're most needed, okay? The heroes of old, the saviors of the world, the messiahs of the world, etc. And he looks over and they're having a conversation, and she says, it's never too late to be a hero. That's the good news. That's the good news of Christianity. That is the gospel. That is the good news of everything. There's always good news, okay? No matter how bad things get, it's never too late for you to change and choose different actions, to start practicing doing something that's good. Just do what you know to be good. Stick to that. It's never too late to be a hero. And that is our movie, Renfield. I hope that you guys enjoyed it and had a good time in the chat. I know it was kind of long, but this was a really good one, and I really enjoyed presenting this to you. I also want to give a special huge shout out to everyone who has supported me in the chat through membership, donations, likes, sharing my videos, but also to one person out there named Michael. I have a viewer named Michael who decided to comp me and my son a vacation stay at a resort up in Steamboat Springs this week. So on Wednesday and Thursday, I will be gone on a vacation. I rented a car and everything to go up and, live like I'm rich for a couple of days up in this awesome resort up in Steamboat Springs in Colorado. So I'm super excited about that. Big thank you to all the people that, anybody that sends stuff to my P.O. box, all the people that donate, and anybody that supports me. Thank you so much, Max Collins. And who is that last one? Boogled also donated in the chat, and anybody else too. I'm just honored. This is actually technically our 100th Truth in Movies episode. So if you like it, and if you want to help out me or my channel, go and leave some comments, leave a like, talk about it. Tell me what your favorite parts were. Tell everyone else what your favorite parts were, because lots of other people are in there reading the comment section as well. Until next time, I'm JayDreamerZ saying good vibes and goodbye.
to